Hi, welcome to ML Buchman's 5 Insider Factoids. I keep doing that off the screen. There, five. 5 Insider Factoids. They're answers to questions that readers have sent me or asked me in public or whatever. Um, so let's talk about Target of the Heart, The Night Stalkers, number 8. It was also originally The Night Stalkers 5e number 1. Here's why. The, what happened was I was leaving my publisher, and they had the first 7 books of the Night Stalker series. One of the things about marketing a series is you want to be able to manipulate and advertise the first book in that series. And by manipulate, I mean offer a discount or make it a giveaway or bundle it with the second book or do any of those things. None of which I could do with Night Stalkers number 1, The Night Is Mine, starring Emily Beale. Now I can because I got the rights back. But back then, they owned the rights. Uh, all I could do was promote something that would make them more money. And let me tell you, when you are with a traditional publisher, you're making very little money. So by moving into independent publishing and self-publishing, I wanted to get book 1 again. So I created that first 7 book series was all based on the 5th Battalion D Company that had been created by Mark Henderson, and Emily Beale had joined it. So that's the other reason that the Chinook series that I mentioned that started with By Break of Day ended up being a 1 book series instead of 5, one for each seat in the helicopter. So in creating the 5e, I wanted to create something brand new so that I had a new book 1, but I still wanted to capture that Night Stalker's feeling and the action and the tension. So that's how the 5e came into being, was I needed to own the Night Stalker series so I could actually do promotions that my publisher wasn't doing, so that I could actually invite fans into my world in a way that I couldn't with the publisher owning the rights to publish the first 7 books. So what did I do to create that difference? And that I had to build a new cast. So I started with Training Day, uh, which I had done in the Delta Force series, but I never did in the Night Stalker series. We start them in the action. They're already a functioning company. And I've written a couple of short stories about their training, but for the most part, we don't see that beginning, that early training and testing. So I open this book with uh, the training and the final test, and I bring in, the outside expert who ends up leading the company. And what makes the difference is I said, okay, the 5D was all about the helicopters and the technology and the mission and the people. Let's add another factor. And in 2011, which is after I'd written the first 4 of the Night Stalkers books, uh, there was the raid on, but before the first one came out, there was the raid on bin Laden's compound, where a stealth helicopter crashed, broke over the edge of a wall, and they blew up. And it actually didn't break. They thought they could have flown it out of there, but they didn't want to risk it. So they blew up the whole front of the helicopter that was inside the compound, and the tail had been sitting up on the wall. And so when they blew up the body, the tail went clink over the outside wall. And the Pakistanis then sold it to China. Oh well. Um, but a lot was learned from this rotor, and everybody was all excited about the stealth helicopter. I went, they didn't do just one of these. It's not the way this works. So there were probably several stealth aircraft in that mission, which is never talked about. And what, and they're they're not going to stop development on something that worked. So they didn't send some untested, unknown aircraft into raid bin Laden's compound. They sent in the best. And so somewhere there had to be missions that were so specialized, like the bin Laden raid, that a stealth helicopter would be called for. So I thought, let's take the 5D, and when we make the 5E, I want to give them even more out there missions, and they became the 5 Extreme, if you will, or exotic or whatever. I gave them stealth helicopters, and I gave them a stealth airfield, and I gave them a great deal of autonomy, and I gave them crazy missions. I mean, if they're going to be extreme, okay, let's the first 7 books, any of those could happen pretty easily. These 4 books of the 5E, yeah, maybe yes, maybe no. But it was so much fun to write. It was so much fun to get into these characters and get to play in this exotic world I had created of the stealth helicopters of the Night Stalkers. So for the cast, I wanted to both break and keep the Beale legacy. I mean, I wish I could create another character like her. She defined what became the 42-book Emily Beale universe. She was the through character that launched the Firehawks. She had her fingers in the White House Protection Force and Night Stalker Psi, and she was just such a strong character. So I wanted to carry that legacy forward, but I didn't want to have Beale participate. I wanted her to be done. She was with the 5D. She went on to Henderson's Ranch. She has other things coming up, but I wanted this one group to sort of be free of that Beale legacy and see what that was like and see what those adventures and those characters would be like. But I also wanted to create a continuity between the first 7 books and what became the 4 books of the 5E, and eventually became the 11 books of the Night Stalker's main flight. And so I crossed over a couple characters, and I've always had a weak spot for the hero and heroine of book number 3, and I brought Connie and Big John across. And then during the test, they fly against Lola and Trisha. So I got to play with that connection a bit, but I didn't carry those people very far. Big John and Connie just kind of fade into the background, and we find out from short stories what they're doing, but they didn't stay front and center. And so it created its own cast, and ended up having I really liked the way the cast worked out, and occasionally we get one person or another dropping in from before, but it really was intended to be its own object, its own adventure. Now, the trigger I was looking for the mission, because to explain the training thoroughly and the creation of a new team and the creation of a new type of company, that takes up a lot of book. So rather than turning this into some grand epic novel, I was looking for something to be their first mission that's just crazy mission. It's just a crazy mission. And I was reading about, at the time, the U.S. still had the largest Navy in the world, but China was catching up pretty fast. And now China has the largest, and I'll get into this. And it's in the news and so on, but it wasn't in the news at that point. It was like just the trade journals were kind of going, hold it. The Chinese are building ships really fast and we aren't. Now, to put this in perspective, during World War II, the U.S. had over 6,000 Navy vessels. This is aside from Air Force, aside from Army. This is Navy vessels. The U.S. now has about 300, and the numbers vary a lot. At one point, I think it's in the 2000s, maybe the 90s, the number got so low that what they did was they decided to start counting everything. So they started counting patrol boats and tugboats, and because they had to show Congress that they had a force over 250, and they didn't. So once they counted all the tugs and the little transport resupply ships from the Marine Sea Lift Command, Maritime Sea Lift Command, um, they got it up to like 272. The U.S. now has about 300. Their missions call for about 500. So it's still a smaller Navy than they want. That's changing again. I'm recording this in 2024 with the shift to autonomous vehicles and remotely piloted unmanned vehicles, sea lift drones, where you send out a 100-foot ship with armament or supplies or whatever's needed, and it doesn't need any people on board. So they're working very hard on that technology. So they may not need to build this fleet of 500 warships that they envisioned as recently as 5 years ago. China is building very fast. They're building a lot of boats very fast. They tend to be smaller. They tend to be lighter. They should not be ignored, but they also don't have the just the raw power of the American boats. The American aircraft carrier has the ability to project immense amounts of force at anywhere in the world, and nobody else can do this. The you know the UK has two, of which one still doesn't work, and the other one's okay. The Russian one is considered a prison ship. You have to really screw up to be assigned to the Admiral Kustanov. The Chinese have one or two. There are a lot of ships that are sized down. Helicopter carriers is what they're called. I mentioned them in another video. The USS Peleliu, which carried around Marines for 30 or 40 years. So the Chinese has the biggest navy, but not the most powerful navy by any measure. So that balance is going to keep continuing to shift and change as global strategies continue to shift and change. So I thought this was a good place. At the time of this writing that I wrote this, China had just built their first super Coast Guard cutter. This thing was basically the size of a U.S. destroyer. It was a monstrous ship. And we were trying to gather intelligence and go, are they going to do more of these? Because these things are ferociously powerful. And so I thought about, what if we could send a team in to learn about this ship? Well, how do you do that? It still wasn't finished when I was writing. What if they go in and they create a data feed that will tell us about the ship and what it does and what its capabilities are on an ongoing basis? So that set up the final crisis. Then I was looking like, okay, how do I ramp up the tension for the pilots? Because they fly in, they drop off the specialized SEAL team, and just as the Night Stalkers were embedded in the 5D in the main Night Stalker series, I figured I'd go somewhere different, and I embedded people from DevGru, SEAL Team 6, into the 5E. So they drop off the SEALs, they go off and do their mission. What's happening that's going to be exciting for the helicopter guys? And I started looking around the port where they're building these ships, and I discovered the Qiantang, I'm sure I'm saying it wrong, Qiantang River. It has the world's largest tidal bore. Now, I grew up in the northeast of the U.S., up in New England, and we did a trip when I was like 15 or 16 up to see the Bay of Fundy tidal bore, which can be up to 50 feet high. So as the way the bay is placed, as the bay narrows, the tide comes in and it rises up, and it'll actually come in as a bore, as a wave. And the day we went, poor timing, the bore was about 6 inches high. But it was still weird watching this wave run up the river. Well, the bore in the Qiantang is quite different. And I will mute that. But so what I started watching these videos of this wave, and people will actually surf this wave, but the river is so polluted that you really shouldn't. It makes people very sick. It's killed off. It's actually driven extinct a dolphin species that was exclusive to this river. But this bore keeps going and building, and it's going right through the center of a large city. And it bounces off sides of the channels that have been built all through the city. And this is one of my favorite moments of this particular video, is there's somebody here with a cell phone taking a picture of this thing coming at them. It's like, this is not a smart move. This is not somebody with a survival mechanism. But look at the implacable wave that just keeps coming. And it runs miles up this river. And it goes through dog-leg shapes that we'll see up here in a moment. I just wanted to let this video run just because it's such an amazing thing. If you go to YouTube, watch the truck there, you're going to see it. This is now from the truck running just ahead of the tidal bore. There are a lot of videos on YouTube about this. This is a very historic. This was the 10-year high because of the alignment of the moon and the sun and the pressure of the weather system at the moment. It's this immense amount of water moving at 40 miles an hour, 40 kilometers an hour. So this isn't something that you can go out in around except in the fastest boats. So this became the setting that I used to heighten the tension of, there's this maneuver called the Delta Queen, where a Chinook will actually land in the water and lower its rear gate. See if I can get my hand in the frame here. They lower the rear gate. The seals will come up in a boat and drive up into the cargo bay. They raise the gate, tip up the helicopter so it drains water, close the gate, and they fly off with the seals inside the helicopter. But creating that maneuver on the fly in the midst of the tidal bore, that was the tension I was looking for, and that was the fun, and that became kind of the marker of the 5E exotic. How insanely crazy can I make this? So anyway, that is the summary of this book. Thank you for listening or watching. Visit my website. There are recipes, bonus stories, more of these videos. Sign up for the newsletter. There are freebies and newsletter exclusives. Thank you so much. Take care. See you next time.